Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Uh, my name is Michelle Dunn. I'm Executive Director of Franciscan Action Network, and I'm going to be moderating today's program, today's dialogue with Palestinian and Israeli bereaved families for peace. While we are getting started, the chat function is open for now. If you would like to, please put your name in the chat and where you're joining from so you can see. We have about almost 190 people on this call, and we welcome you sharing where you're joining from. And as we start, I want to thank the co-sponsors of this event, the Laudato Si Center for Integral Ecology at Siena College, the Conventual Franciscan Friars, Our Lady of Angels Province, and the Order of Friars Minor, Our Lady of Guadalupe Province. Thank you very much for supporting this event. And also thank you to the individual donors who supported today's event. We're gathering today because all of us care about peace. In this case specifically, we're talking about peace between Palestinians and Israelis, and we're deeply concerned about the horrific bloodshed that is going on right now. More than 31,000 Palestinians, including more than 13,000 children, have been killed in Gaza since October. More than 1,200 Israelis were killed in Israel, and nearly 250 Israeli soldiers have been killed in Gaza. There are tens of thousands more wounded, 1.7 million people displaced in Gaza, families separated, more than 130 Israelis still being held hostage in Gaza. And all of that is just the most recent tragic chapter in a broader Israeli-Palestinian issue that's been going on now for more than a century. And as many of you know, this is an issue that means a great deal to me personally. I personally worked on this issue at the US Department of State and later the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And I can tell you, as you probably know, that we in the United States are deeply implicated in this issue. We are in no way neutral. So we need to be deeply concerned about what's going on and deeply engaged. Today, we have a really special opportunity to hear from an Israeli and a Palestinian who have paid the ultimate price, who have lost a precious, irreplaceable member of their family to this conflict. We're here to listen to and learn from their stories, their experiences of loss and of reconciliation after loss. Today's event was organized by the Parents Circle Family Forum, an organization of more than 600 Israeli and Palestinian families formed in 1995. And all of these families have lost an immediate family member to this ongoing conflict. The Parents Circle holds many different educational activities, including dialogue meetings such as this one. And we're going to share with you a link to the Parents Circle website here in the meeting, and it will also be in the follow-up email that you will receive after this webinar. As always, we begin our activities at Franciscan Action Network with prayer. And I want to invite now Father Jacek Orzechowski, an OFM friar and the Associate Director of the Laudato Si Center for Integral Ecology at Siena College. This whole event was his idea, and it's most suitable that he would open up by leading us in prayer and making some brief remarks. Father Jacek.
Let us pray. O God of mercy and compassion, God of justice and peace, we praise you for your love, which reaches out to all, embraces all. Those who suffer from violence, the poor, the forgotten, those whose cries for help are being muted, they are especially dear to you. Through Prophet Isaiah, you conveyed to us your dream that one day your children will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Open our prophetic eyes to see a future yet to unfold, in which a nation shall not lift a sword against another, nor shall they learn war anymore. We lift up our voices to you, O God, for those who have lost their lives in Gaza, in Israel, in the West Bank. We pray for a release of the hostages, for hundreds of thousands who are starving, for an immediate and permanent ceasefire. O God of justice, we acknowledge our country's complicity in the horrific violence taking place in the Holy Land. O God, have mercy on us. Make us instruments of your peace and healing in the wounded world. We pray for those who engage in active nonviolence, especially for Israeli, Palestinian bereaved families for peace, and for other Jewish, Palestinian, and global solidarity group. Strengthen our resolve so that we can dare to believe and act on your divine promise of a beloved community where everyone could live in peace and security and no one be afraid. We ask this of you, O God of Shalom, Salam, peace. Amen. 800 years ago, during the Crusades, St. Francis of Assisi defied his contemporary society and its way of thinking and acting towards the Muslims. He said no to those who expected him to join the chorus of those demonizing the other side. He refused to treat them as enemies. Francis dared to cross the battle lines. He sought to make peace, not through coercion or military might, but rather through respectful dialogue. He opened his mind and heart in compassion to give and receive as a lesser brother in humility and muscular hope for a better world. Today's conversation with Israeli and Palestinian members of the Bereaved Families for Peace exemplifies a similar prophetic courage that St. Francis of Assisi, as a follower of Jesus, exhibited on the battlefields of Damietta. Our Jewish, Christian, and Muslim traditions are replete with references to peace. It is both a divine gift and our human mission. It involves seeking truth, pursuing justice, opening one's eyes to the humanity and sacredness of all. In that holy quest for peace, we are not alone. God of mercy walks with us every step of the way. The creator of the universe can help dispel the illusion that violence can guarantee safety and security, that raw military power and political hegemony can substitute for an authentic peace. Our speakers, Rabbi and Arab, are here with us to whisper into our ears God's song, a dream of a beloved community, a world of radical love, of reconciliation, healed of all divisions, renewed and transformed. We believe that for God, nothing is impossible.
Thank you, Father Jacek. We'll now hear from our Israeli and Palestinian guests. They're each going to make some remarks. They're each going to tell us their story. And then after that, we're going to have an opportunity for open question and answer with them. The way we'll do that is you will submit your questions through the Q&A button that's at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And I want to invite you to start submitting questions at any time. They're only going to go to the hosts of the program. You're not going to disturb the other participants. So feel free to start putting in questions during the presentation. And then afterwards, I will raise your questions with the speaker. Our two speakers today, I'm going to introduce them briefly, are Robi Damelin and Arab Aramin. I want to thank them first for being willing to come here and to re-experience the trauma of their losses one more time in order to teach us and for us to learn from them. Thank you. It's got to be very difficult to do that. I also want to thank them. It's late in the evening where they are. In Israel and Palestine, it's now past 9 o'clock in the evening. So thank you. So let me say briefly, Robi Damelin is spokesperson and director of international relations for the Parents Circle Family Forum. She joined the organization after her son was killed by a Palestinian sniper. All her work on the ground, both in Palestine and Israel, as well as internationally, is geared towards nonviolence and reconciliation as a means to end the occupation. And Arab Aramin is a Palestinian. In 2007, his sister Abiad was shot and killed in front of her school by an Israeli border police officer. Arab is a member and activist in the Parent Circle Family Forum, and his father, Bassam Aramin, has served as the Palestinian co-director of the organization. Robi and Arab, Erev Tov, Ramadan Kareem, thank you so much for being with us. I believe in our pre-conversation, Arab insisted that you, Robi, go first. So I invite you now, please, and thank you for sharing your story with us.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. I wanted to ask you right in the beginning to take all your opinions, your beliefs, what you know or what you think you know about Israel and Palestine and the situation, and just put it next to you on the chair and let's talk to the heart. This is one of the most difficult times that I can ever have experienced while living in Israel. It's heartbreaking, it's fear-making, and one wonders how this could possibly have happened. But then you start to think, if I was a young boy growing up in Gaza, and every 2 years there would be a war, and I didn't have a shelter, and I watched my mother running with my other brothers and sisters to try and find some shelter, which was probably impossible. And this happened every 2 years, and I didn't have any freedom of movement, and I actually didn't have any hope. Then what kind of adult will I grow up to be? What would I be capable of doing? And if I lived on one of the kibbutzim on the border of Gaza and say, you know, I thought I was kind of invincible because we had a lot of rockets all the time. And I can tell you personally, that's very frightening because I had many, many rockets outside of my house. But I have a shelter. So they thought they were invincible. But then on the 7th of October came what happened with the Hamas attack, and suddenly they were not so invincible. And what about the children who live in Sderot and Ashkelon and Ashdod, who've been having rockets in their homes ever since they were small kids and are still wetting their beds at the age of 12? So it's so easy to be judgmental, but what kind of adults are they going to be? And so our work is so cut out for us. We have so much to do now, and we have to understand why. I think a lot of the work that we're doing is to understand why people do things. How could I understand how this man could kill my son when I found out that when he was a little boy, had seen his uncle violently killed by the Israeli army, and when he lost 2 further uncles in the second uprising, that's when he decided to go on a path of revenge, and that's when he killed 10 people. And so that was only later on when I began to understand why. When we understand why, it can be the beginning of a dialogue. I remember, actually, I don't remember, but I'm told that when the army came to tell me that David had been killed by a Palestinian sniper, one of the first things that I said is, you can't kill anybody in the name of my child. I don't know where that came from. I didn't even know I said it. I was told afterwards. But that was the beginning of something. I knew almost immediately that I wanted to do something to prevent others, especially mothers, from experiencing this pain. I can't. There's nothing worse. You know, I'm a fixer, but I can't fix this. And I didn't know exactly in what direction to go. I spoke at a very big demonstration, even in those days, to get out of the occupied territories, and that we needed a partner on the Palestinian side. And some people from the Parent Circle heard me talking, and they came to invite me to a weekend in East Jerusalem to meet other Palestinian and Israeli bereaved families. And actually, when I got there, I remember sitting around the table, and looking into the eyes of the Palestinian mothers and realizing that we shared the same pain. And that when we cried over the graves of our children, those tears would be the same color. And we could be the most incredible influence if we could stand on the stage and talk in the same voice for nonviolence and reconciliation. Then surely that would be an example for the rest of the people. If we, the most unlikely people, could do that. So I started to travel all over the world, and I happen to know English. It's not because I'm brilliant. I was actually born in South Africa. So I think it was pretty easy then for me to speak English. And everywhere I went with a Palestinian partner. And I was really, really quite pleased with myself and thought I was doing a great job. And one night, when I was sitting next to my computer at home, there was another knock on my door. And when I opened the door, there were 3 soldiers standing there, and that can only mean one thing. And I just slammed the door in their face because I just could not face losing another child. It was just beyond what I could cope with. And they kept knocking and knocking and knocking, and eventually I opened the door, and they said, "We came to tell you that we caught the man who killed David." Now that's when it became difficult. You see, you can walk around and talk about peace and love and reconciliation and use all these wonderful words, but do you really mean it? Would it be an integrity for me to continue to work in the framework of the parent circle if I wasn't willing to walk the talk? And so after 3 months of not sleeping, I woke up one morning and I wrote a letter to the family of the sniper. His name is Thaya. And I told them about the parent circle. Actually, we are now 700 members, and there will be many more since October the 7th. And I told him about David. He was a student at Tel Aviv University, and he was studying for his master's in the philosophy of education. And that's in many ways what forced me to talk about peace education. And I told them that what we're looking for on the parent circle is to create a framework for a reconciliation process to be an integral part of any political future peace agreement. I also said we should meet. We owed that to our children and grandchildren. And I, of course, not a very patient character. I expect to get a letter back from the sniper after 2 Palestinians from our group delivered it within days, but it took 3 years. You see, there is instant reconciliation doesn't really happen. It doesn't necessarily happen overnight. It could take years, and it may never happen. After 3 years, I got a letter back from Thaya in which he said I was crazy. I already knew that, and that I should stay away from his family, and that he killed 10 people to free Palestine. But you see, here it came, I began to understand, because the family told us that when he was a small boy, he saw his uncle violently killed. This was, for me, another milestone in my life. What happened was I gave up being a victim. My life was no longer contingent on what Thaya would decide to do. And I became a victor. I didn't say a survivor, I said a victor. And I went back to South Africa and we made a film about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because we wanted to see what people who'd given evidence, what they thought today, both victims and perpetrators. And for me, this was also looking for the meaning of forgiveness. What's the meaning of forgiveness? I asked everybody in a lecture, and if I could see you all and we could all talk, I would ask you, each of you, what do you mean when you say you forgive? And I'd met this woman whose daughter was killed and she'd gone to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and said to the men who killed her daughter, "I forgive you." And I wanted to know what she meant. So I asked her for her definition, and she said, forgiving is giving up your just right to revenge. And then I met the man who actually sent the people who killed her daughter. And he said, and I think this was the most heartbreaking and wonderful insight. He said, by her forgiving me, she released me from the prison of my inhumanity. That for me was another turning point. I came back, I tried to meet with Thaya, but unfortunately the law in Israel is that he has to ask to meet me. That's where the story stands now. But I really wanted to talk about so many other things, about how we can stop taking sides, on how we can be part of the solution. You know, I've been to the States twice since the beginning of the war, and I watched all the polarization and the anger and the flags and the I think also fear. And people have now become major experts on the Middle East. Everybody knows exactly what's going on and what would happen. And then I think about, do they know Maozi Non? Maozi Non lost both his parents were burned to death. And he's talking out for peace and to end and for a ceasefire. And I look at the son of Vivian Silva. Vivian Silva was my friend. She started Women Wage Peace, and she used to travel with children from Gaza to hospitals in Israel and back again. And I thought she was a hostage. And it turns out that she too was burned to death. But her son has joined the parent circle as well. And he too is talking out for peace and to end the violence. So for goodness sake, if these people who after not even 4 months were, or after a week were already saying that, then surely we can look to become part of the solution and stop importing this conflict into your country and creating hatred between Jews and Muslims. That doesn't help not Arab and not me. Be a part of the solution. Tell the stories instead of your flags and your posters. Why don't you tell the story of a mother from Gaza who lost her child, or of a little boy that I saw in a clip who was hanging onto his cat and said he's not traveling unless they will let him take his cat with him to the south, running away in Gaza. And the little girl who came out of being a hostage, holding on to her dog called Bella. Tell those kind of stories. Tell the stories of mothers in Israel who lost children. Tell the stories of the hostages. Learn the human side of the story, and then compassion will start. And maybe then we can all come to the table and start to talk, because that's what you should be pushing for. We have to do that. Thank you. Arab, your turn, my dear.
Oh gosh. Thank you, Ruby. Hi to you all. My name is Arab Ramin. I am 30 years old. I was born in East Jerusalem. I still live in East Jerusalem. And I joined the parent circle in 2014. And it took with me a long time to join the parent circle. In the beginning, I was the biggest enemy for my father, which is my hero. And the reason why it was I didn't know the other side as a human being, because I never saw them as a human being. And sorry, I will try my best in very short time to explain my story and to talk a little bit about myself. And بسام لو سمحت أنا في الزون. I will start with this. 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I bought myself in the golden jail. I got married, and today I'm a father for a kid. And I love my jailer, which is my wife. And I have two heroes. One, it's my father, and the second one, it's my kid. And I will explain in my story how and why. My father, Bassam Ramin, he was in the Israeli jail for 7 years, from age 16 to 23. And my father's crime was to throw stones on the soldiers who was visiting my father's village where he was born and grown up. And my father also and his friends was burning the Palestinian flag on the trees, in the streets, and in the school, which was a big crime in that time. And since when I started to understand things and asking questions, so I wanted to know what's happened to my hero in the jail and how the soldiers and the jailers was treating my father. So I was asking a lot of questions, but there is no answers. And I didn't know why he never answered my question. I will stop here and I will start with my story. On 16th of January 2007, I was 13 years old and I am the oldest one in the house. We are 6 kids, 3 boys and 3 girls. My sister Abir, she the third one in the house, and she wasn't only the third sister for me, she was my second mother also. So in that day, an Israeli soldier shot and killed her. And in that day, or one day after that, I stopped to go to the school anymore because my school was in front of her school and we was going together from to the school and back to the school, to the house together. So it was so difficult for me to go again to the school. And in that time, I was lying to my family that I'm going to the school every day because I was putting the bag on my shoulder and tell them goodbye in the morning. And I create a new school for myself, which is the checkpoint, and which is not that far from where I live. And I wanted to kill all the Israelis around the world in that time, because as I said, there is no human being the other side, and all the Israelis, they killed my sister. Until the age of 13, I saw the Israelis only who was standing on the checkpoints, searching me, searching my family, searching my people. Or the soldiers who was visiting my house at 5 o'clock in the morning, broken the door, taking my father from the bed because he has a Palestinian ID and my mother, she has an Israeli ID, and they can't be in the same bed without permission for my father. So there is no human being in the other side until that age. And especially it comes bigger and bigger when they killed my sister. So as I said, I wanted to take revenge for my sister's blood, and I was very angry and mad at my father, and especially in these days, because I was sawing the Israelis around my father in my house, visiting us, trying to talk to my mother, and I wasn't understand what they doing here. So I was telling my father all the time that you are a cheater for my sister's blood because you keep talking to those Israelis who killed my sister. And in that time, my father told me that you're right, one Israeli soldier shot and killed your sister, but more than 100 Israelis was next to me in the hospital for 3 days, supporting me, supporting your mother. And you don't have to you don't have to jump in that black box of fate and revenge. And in that day, actually, I couldn't understand that well what he means, but I could feel the pain because it's already inside of me. And a few weeks after that, one of my father friend called my father and said, "Save your son and tell him to stop throwing stones on the checkpoint, or otherwise you're gonna lose him." So in that day, I went back to my hero, and my hero was waiting behind the door. And the first question was, "How is your school, Arab?" And I said, "It's great, and the teachers loves me so much." So he said, "You start to lie, and we have to start people to kill people for anger and
I think I think that Arab has lost his connection, but I see that he's getting right back on.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
No problem.
Okay, so in that day, after when my father knew that I'm throwing stones, so we talked a little bit. Then I told my father that you are a cheater, as I said, to my sister blood. and it's not correct what you're doing. And I think you can take her revenge, so I will take it. And he said that you don't have to let the hate to control your life. And we're not weak people to kill people. But yeah, we're very strong people to be against our anger and hate. So in that day, I promised my father and I promised God. I put my hand on the Muslims book, which is the Quran Kareem. And I promised my father and God that I will never throw stones again. But I will never stop revenging for my sister blood. And my father agreed with that. He said, I accept that. And I went back in that day to my room to think about that kind of new revenge. So I confused myself and I went back to him and I said, how can I do my revenge now, but without violence? And he told me that there is too many kinds for revenge and there is revenge without violence. But first of all, I have to make peace with myself. I have to be clear with myself. And then I can find a way of revenge in different way. So after 2 years of that, I went to Buchenwald, one of the death camps. And also I will never forget that trip in my life because I thought I'm gonna learn something big from that big Hitler who killed 6 million Jewish people. And kind of something that he did to your enemy. And when I went to the death camp and after 2 seconds, I start to cry for the people who lost their life for nothing. And I confused myself more and more. And I get out of that death camp with a lot of questions, but there is no answers because I don't know my enemy. So I went back here and I start to know more about my enemy because once I hear that if you want to win your enemy, learn more about your enemy. But if you want to kill yourself, hate your enemy more. So I didn't want to die. And I start to know more and learn more about the other side. And when I start to know more about the other side from the other side, I was shocked. Because as I said, there is no human being the other side in my eyes, in my mind, in that time, so they don't die. And I met a lot of people who lost their kids, their sons, their brothers and sisters. So after a while, I find out a lot of things that I start to lose inside of me, which is the hate for the other side because I start to know more about the other side, and the fear from the other side because I start to talk to the other side. And Martin Luther King says, we hate each other because we don't know each other, and we don't know each other because we don't talk to each other. So if we decide to talk to each other, then we will know each other. Then we will have the option. If we have to kill each other, or there is a different way. As a Muslim, and I'm proud of myself, proud of my religion, I believe in God and I pray 5 times a day. I believe so much that this land, it's not for the Israelis and it's not for the Palestinians. I believe so much that this land, it's for both of us. It's for the people from the God. And we have to learn how to share it together. Or in the end, we're gonna make it from this big land to big graves for those 2 crazy nations. I'm not gonna talk too much. I will leave some time for question and I will finish it with Martin Luther King says, tomorrow we will not remember the silence of our friends, but we will remember the words of, sorry, we will not remember the silence of our enemies, but we will remember the words of our friends. So please, friends, don't keep silent. And thank you for inviting us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hadab. Thank you, Ravi. I invite you back to the screen. We're going to have now question and answer with our participants. I'm going to take the privilege of the first question. I mentioned that I worked on this region and even on diplomacy related to this conflict for a long time. And one of the things that I continue to find most discouraging when I speak to Americans about Israel Palestine is a lot of people say they've been fighting forever. They'll just keep on fighting. That's, there's no answer. There's no way out. And there's nothing to be done, just kind of a hopelessness. And, frankly, also from some people from the region, some Palestinians, some Israelis I've spoken to also have a mindset of, we just live in perpetual conflict. That's just what it is. Right. Maybe I am too much of a problem solver as an American, but I find that so hard to just think of somehow accepting perpetual conflict. And I'm just curious what your reaction is, how you think about this, whether this conflict, although some people say it's been going on for thousands of years, I think that's not accurate. But even if we say it's been going on a century in one form or another, how do you think about, I'm not asking you to come up with a solution, but do you believe, do you see it as a state of perpetual conflict? And how would you like outsiders to look at it?
Who are you asking?
Well, Robbie, I think we will begin with you. It looks like Arab's connection probably dropped again, and I'm sure he'll get back on as soon as he can.
If we give up hope, that's the end. So firstly, if you would have told me when I first came to live in Israel in 1967, that's a long time ago, that blacks and whites would sit together in the same room and not want to kill each other when Mandela came out of jail, I might have said you were crazy, even though I was in the anti-apartheid movement most of my life. So if you give up that kind of hope, if that happened, there was a miracle there. I cannot imagine that this can go on much longer. Firstly, there was a basic humiliation of the Israeli army on the 7th of October. You have to begin to understand, I keep saying understand why. Why do people behave in certain ways? And that humiliation that they could not protect the citizens leads to revenge. And that, I think, is a reason for quite a lot of this terrible behavior, as a feeling of hopelessness in many ways, because we couldn't defend, and the Israeli army's always been able to defend. And so now that myth got kind of exploded in a way. But if we give up doing what we're doing, who will ever take this forward? Who will show people that there is another way? So I'm an ancient lady now, but there are quite a lot of young people coming into this organization. And this is the reason why I get up every morning for the past 20 years and have not given up thinking that there is another way. And maybe out of all this dreadful situation that happened now, just maybe the world will actually come to the solution by helping us to get together and talk, because there isn't another way. And the circumstances of the people living in Gaza have to change, because otherwise it'll have another name. You can't kill an idea. And you have to also understand, sorry, I shouldn't say you have to, you don't have to. But I think it's very important to understand what's happening in the West Bank, because that's off Broadway at the moment. But there have been a closure since the 7th of October. And so people have not been able to go to work. And so they haven't earned salaries since then. Thousands and thousands of people. And so the children, and not everybody can go to school now. And so there's no freedom of movement. And so there's domestic violence. And that's what's happening in the West Bank, and people are being killed, and the settlers are running rampant. But is anybody telling you that? Does anybody tell you that 200,000 people are displaced in Israel since October, both from the north and both from the south? They haven't been able to go to their homes because of the war. All of these things are like, do you know all of these things? You know, but still, what I told you in the beginning, the hope that I have is that the Bedouin who came from Rahat on the 7th of October came to the music festival. They had no stake in this. They came to from unrecognized villages to save some of the kids from the music festival on the 7th of October. And I think 19 of them were killed and some were taken as hostages. So these are extraordinary stories of extraordinary people, and there are extraordinary people here on both sides. And I believe that at some point, we will actually recognize that war doesn't work.
Thank you, Roby. Autumn, thanks for rejoining us. So we were, I had started with that very basic question of what do you say when people say there's no answer, there's no way out, this is just going to be perpetual conflict. I'm interested in what would be your response to that?
Okay, thank you for the question. And actually, I had a short story with my best friend about this question, and he was against what I'm doing. And also, he was calling me for a while that I'm a cheater. And once I took him with me to meeting between Israelis and Palestinian. And in the beginning, he wasn't like he wanted to be there, but he's there. And we was there for 2 days. In the end of the last day, he started to talk with two Israelis, and they said something, and he like wanted to know more. And it was with the organization it called Combatants for Peace. And after 3 weeks or 4 weeks of that, Zakaria, my best friend, he became one of the people is very active, especially in the demonstrations in the streets. And he came to me and he said, "Thank you for opening my eyes." So in our situation, we need TTT. Things takes time. And especially with Palestinian and Israeli, because we're looking at each other as enemies, not a human being. And all most of us, we don't know each us. We heard about each us. We saw each other in the TV. And, we're like kind of shocked when sometimes some people, like some Palestinian, when they meet Ruby and she is very, very human being. And they like, there is a lot of Israelis in your side like you. And I hear that too many times from Israelis. When I talk to them, they're like, it's the first time we meet a Palestinian who don't want to kill us. So there is a lot of Palestinian and Israelis that they are good, but we don't know about them. So our situation, it's not easy, but we have no options also. We have just two options here. Like for the people who doesn't know what's we living here, we have two options only. The first one, which is very hard to talk. And that's what we choose, to talk and to show people that behind every Palestinian and Israeli, there is a human being. And the other option, which is very horrible and very easy, unfortunately, to die and to kill. Thank you for your question.
Yeah, thank you, Autumn. What I'm taking from what you said is you spoke about individual transformation, that an individual can be transformed, and maybe we can extrapolate that to, transformation can happen on a larger scale. But I do want to follow up with you on one question. My impression, Autumn, is that the opportunities for Israelis and Palestinians to meet each other face to face and to have the kind of individual exchanges and relationship building that you're mentioning are less now than they used to be. I lived there in the 1990s, and it seemed to me there was more going on then in terms of dialogue activities and so forth. Am I right or wrong about that? And what it seems as though things are more polarized. Israelis and Palestinians are more physically separated, and it's more difficult for them to meet. And it seems as though there are not as many organizations to bring them together, Parent Circle aside. Tell me what you think. What is this correct perception? And if so, what can be done about it?
Of course, it's a correct perception, but we're in the middle of a war. What do you want? An instant, everybody will sing and hug each other? No. This is going to take time. People have to breathe. People have to grieve. People have to get rid of this anger that's going on. And more than anything, the fear of what could happen, the fear in the heart of a Palestinian mother, the fear in the heart of an Israeli mother. So, but how do we broadcast this message in a much broader sense? And mainly looking at America and what's happening on the campuses and the polarization, we have had thousands and thousands of people being in touch with us, just like you are tonight. And we can't possibly manage to talk to everybody. And so what we've done with Georgetown University, which is something I want to tell you about because I think it's of interest, we are creating a dialogue, a film of a dialogue. It will be online, something like we did tonight, with question and answer and 2 personal stories. We have 3 of them. And actually, Georgetown have this wonderful department to help us edit and package, and they're going to do that. And we had a wonderful meeting with the teachers union in Washington, and they've offered to put it out to the campuses and to some high schools. So this is a way of turning our message, and we can use this all over the world, actually, and also in Israel and Palestine, because there's no way at the moment that we can even meet physically. So we are doing things that are miraculous, in my opinion. For instance, we have the summer camp. Every year we have a summer camp with about 50 kids. And this year, of the kids from last year's summer camp went on the 21st of September, which is International Peace Day, to the UN, and they're in Jerusalem, and they signed a charter for nonviolence and reconciliation. But 3 weeks later, the war happened. And so with this war that happened, of course, the nuances of kids from 14 to 17, it became very ugly on TikTok and on Instagram. They were so angry. And so we couldn't let this just happen. So on a uninational basis, we've been working with them almost since the beginning of the war. And now they've decided that they want to meet. And we want to have the summer camp, but we can't have it in Israel and we can't have it in Palestine. So we're going to take it out for the first time. We don't really want to take it out of the country, but we will. It'll either be in Cyprus or Italy, I'm not sure which. So we can't give up. And so this is a way, if you watch these kids, that for me is extraordinary, that they can work through the anger, they can work through this, watching the Palestinian media and watching the Israeli media, which creates a parallel universe. And so we will raise the money and we will take these kids out of the country and they will have time to heal together. It's the healing that we must have. It's the mothers that we have to visit with the families, because I can tell you when David was killed, the people that brought me the most solace were other bereaved mothers, both Palestinian and Israeli, because they understood. And it's our duty now to do the same for whoever we can.
Adam, is there anything you wanted to add to that in terms of? Yeah.
I agree with every single word that the Queen said.
Okay. There are a lot of questions coming in the Q&A that are related in different ways to the roles of people of faith, whether we are talking about there where you are in Israel, Palestine, or here in the United States. So, for example, one question was, do the efforts of the Parent Circle have support from religious figures, from rabbis, from imams, from Christian clergy there in Israel, Palestine? That is one question. And there was also a question about faith organizations here in the United States, and what role you can see for people of faith, and how you can, does it matter if the voices of people of faith are brought forward, whether relating to the immediate conflict in Gaza right now or the broader conflict. So what do you think about that? I do want to note, I mean, that there are some things going on here. I mean, for example, one of our sponsors today, Siena College, there was, recently, Jewish and Muslim and Christian students group at that college got together and held a joint prayer service. We don't hear about that as much as we hear about the arguments and the polarization and so forth. But, whatever you would like to say about the role of faith leaders and people of faith, whether there where you are or here, outside, speaking about the conflict.
Well, I think I can talk about America and London and Italy. In those three countries, which are very polarized, mainly, I spoke at the Catholic University in Milan, and it was very interesting to see how the students could suddenly begin to understand that they should be part of the solution, not the problem. And we had a vigil at Georgetown University. There were about 200 and something students that came in that beautiful church that they have at Georgetown, which you know. And they weren't allowed to bring flags or placards or anything. They could just bring a candle. And there was a rabbi and an imam and a priest. And I spoke together with the guy, another member of the parent circle. And this was extraordinary because it's this taking all your opinions and putting it next to you and listening to the heart. That's what needs to happen. So in Israel, there are rabbis for human rights who are extraordinary and are doing extraordinary work. But the organization is not faith-based. We have some religious people, but it has nothing to do with the work that we're doing. But there's, for instance, Telos. I don't know if you know them. They work with the evangelical community. I spoke in a church in Chicago, 25,000 members, because they don't recognize that Palestinians even exist, and this is terribly important. They bring groups to Israel and Palestine who listen to dialogue meetings that similar to what we've done. So yes, the same thing happened in London. They had a vigil it was open to the public, so thousands of people came, but they also were not allowed to bring posters or anything. And the Archbishop of Canterbury and a rabbi and an imam, and two of us spoke there. So there is this possibility of showing another way. And yes, that's a role that religion could make. Have a vigil wherever you can and let people look at the heart and not this violent wanting to take sides. I am very frightened of anti-Semitism. I have to be honest about that. I have family in London. Their daughter wears a Star of David, but she wears it inside her shirt, which already tells you something. And she was on the train and it came out of her shirt and somebody came up to her and said, "Die, you bloody Jew." And they are removing all the symbols, on the doors of Jewish families. And so that might remind you of a certain period in the 30s. And we have to be very careful. This can't be an excuse. You can be angry with Israel, you can be angry with Israelis, but you can't suddenly, what is some poor kid studying at your college or at Georgetown College? What's he got to do with the decisions that are made by a war cabinet of fascists? What? It's his fault now? So we have to be so careful of what message we give out. And certainly, I think from a religious point of view, it would be wonderful if they would be more involved in the solution, not the problem. And this wonderful opportunity that you gave us tonight is exactly what we need.
Thank you, Robi. Adam, we've had a couple of questions about how to understand the power, the weight of Hamas among Palestinians. One hears about growing support for Hamas after the October 7th attack in Israel. As a Palestinian, how do you understand what Hamas counts for in Palestinian society? And also, where do you think that's going? And what does that mean in terms of the ability to resolve this conflict?
Okay, just to explain something, and it's very, very, very clear. The people that did what they did, and they from Hamas, they are from the people who lived in Gaza, and they was born in Gaza, and they had been lost brothers, sisters, whatever, and they saw too many wars, and they are living in a big jail from 17 years. So all this pressure on them, of course, for one day it's gonna be bomb. It's very scary. It's very scary what happened there and what happened every day there for the kids and also for the other side. And we always was saying that if we would not have a freedom, Israel will never have security until what happened, what happened. As a Palestinian kid, for myself, I'm gonna talk right now. I was born here. I lived under occupation. I never learned from the school how to hate Israelis, and I never drink milk with hate, and my parents never teach me how to hate, but I hated them from the way that they treat me or they treat me. So I have to choose my words and to send it very, very well. So what happened in Gaza or what happened from Hamas in Israel, it was like we knew it, but we didn't know. Like one day, something happened there or here on this land. Because Gaza also, it's not far from where we live. It's like 1 hour. So Jalaluddin Rumi says, yesterday I was smart that I tried to change the world, but today I became wise that I start to change myself first. So we have each side to look at himself and to change himself. And if we're gonna stay how we're doing right now, we're gonna turn to zombies until the last one of our people. And actually what we're doing in the parent circle, we're trying to save the rest of the humanity that we still have, and the people in the streets also they still have.
Thank you, Arab. Ruby, there's a question for you. And it's related to what you were saying a few minutes ago. How do you respond to those who conflate criticism of the U.S. Military and diplomatic support for Israel, or criticism of that with anti-Semitism? Is Israel being unfairly singled out for harsh criticism? Don't the Israelis have a right to defend themselves? How do you understand the line between criticizing the actions of Israel and U.S. support for the actions of Israel and anti-Semitism?
Firstly, it's two different things. I wish that the money that is being spent on weapons and destruction, the same amount of money would be spent on peace movements. It's like such a small percentage of anybody's economy. That's number one. And number two, I said it very clearly, you can criticize Israel, but it's not an excuse for anti-Semitism. And that's what really worries me about this whole situation, is that this is coming out, and people who have nothing to do, just because you happen to be Jewish doesn't mean that you are pro the war in Israel. And by the way, Nobody seems to care very much about Sudan or about not even any more of any of the African countries, of what's happening there. Thousands and thousands of people are dying. Why does nobody pay any attention to that? And the Ukraine is now off Broadway. It's quite extraordinary how Israel and Palestine has become the main issue in the whole world. And Africa, with thousands of people dying, when I say thousands, thousands and thousands, they don't even know how many. Nobody cares. So what is this? I don't really understand myself. You know, today I heard one of the senators, Schumacher, yes,
Yes,
making
yes,
the comment, and I was so pleased to hear that, because that has to be said. That's the truth. That's criticizing Israel. And he happened to be a very good friend of Netanyahu. I don't want to go into politics here because that's not who we are. But yes, I wish people would invest the same amount of money as in peace movements and in NGOs like us as they do in weapons for the world.
thank you. Well, I want to say of a lot of the people putting in the Q&A, there are just so many expressions of appreciation for both of you, for your honesty, for your willingness to do this, for all that people are going to take away from this. So here's a question, and you know, I'm going to put together two questions and give you each sort of a last few minutes to speak. So one question is, someone just asked very simply, in this situation, and I'm speaking now of the broader conflict, not just what's going on right now. What is there to work for? What does justice and peace in this land mean? What should the broad goal be, those who want to work for it? So that's one. And then another related question for those of us who are outside, the role of the United States, and the role of the international community. Does that need to change in order to foster whatever form of justice and peace you think we should be working toward? Does that need to change, and how? So let me give each of you a couple of minutes to answer that, and also to add any other final thoughts you would like to add.
Of course it has to change. Of course the rest of the world should be pushing us to the table to talk. The occupation has to end, because it's also killing the moral fiber of Israel. That's not easy for me to say. I love this country, don't make any mistake. But what is happening, you cannot oppress another nation for so many years and not expect it to affect your own community. So yes, that has to happen. And people have to be more compassionate, you know, and see the humanity in both the Palestinians and the Israelis, those human stories that I keep telling you about. That consequence creates compassion. It's so easy to judge. It's so easy to take a side. Please stop doing that. Just tell the stories. Just be a part of the solution. Just force your senator or your congressman to say that we have to talk, get us to the table by any means. And that's the whole world. And also pay attention to other conflicts that are happening. This is not the only terrible thing that's happening, and it's terrible, and I can't imagine what it must be like for people in Gaza now. But I also know that there are 200,000 people that are out of their homes in Israel and Palestine, and in Israel in the south and the north, and we're waiting for, who knows, what kind of a war that's going to happen in the north. So this is all this fear that's creating anger and creating hatred. And instead of which, if the rest of the world would start to be part of the solution and not the problem, stop importing our conflict.
Thank you, Robbie. So stop importing the conflict and get you to the table by any means, you said. Thank you. Adam, your thoughts?
Yeah, actually, I'm just gonna add something, which is about the freedom. Because as a Palestinian guy who lived for 30 years, I never saw the freedom in my eyes. Because, I live under occupation. And just to give a small example, if Ruby she gonna come from the end of the north to the end of the south, there is no checkpoints. But if I wanna go from Jerusalem to Jerusalem, I will go with through or go across 3 checkpoints. So what we're doing, and I hope what we're doing to change the future, to change tomorrow. And also, you have to know something that our pain gives us big power, and maybe the power will change something. Because as a bereaved brother, and today I'm a father, tomorrow I don't want to lose my kid like my father. And I don't want my kid to lose his brother or sister like how I did. And about to be pro who and to stand with who. If all the world stand with Palestine, will never end the situation or the problem. And also with all the world stand with Israel, it will never end. I think we have, or all the people have to be pro justice and peace and humanity for both sides, Palestinian and Israelis. It's the only way that you can help both sides. And thank you so much for inviting us tonight.
Thank you, both of you. I mean, thank you for your courageous witness, um, both here today and what you've been doing. I know for years now. I think you've both given us a lot to think about. What does this mean? What does it mean for those of us who are on the outside but who care, to be in favor of justice, peace, and rights for both peoples? And how would that change what we're doing right now to be to take that stance in favor of both? Thank you so much. Uh, uh, Again, Roby, thank you so much. Shalom, Laila Tova, Arab. Thank you for being with us. Ramadan Kareem, Tisfa ala khair. Thank you
Ramadan
both for
Kareem. Shukran.
your
Thank you
precious,
so much.
precious gift of your time and your witness.
Thank you. Thank
It's
you.
our pleasure. Thank you. Good
God
night.
bless you. As we conclude, I just want to make just a couple of announcements to tell you about upcoming events. The Franciscan Action Network has been involved in the Christians for Ceasefire campaign, and that is a campaign that expresses compassion for the victims on both sides, and that calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the release of all the Israeli hostages, and immediate humanitarian assistance for Gaza. Janine has put the link for that in the chat, and you will receive it in the follow-up email if you are interested. There are online actions, and there are a number of actions in DC, including a prayer vigil for peace a week from today, Thursday, March 21st at near the US Capitol. We will also have more peace building activities throughout the year, and some of those will focus on peace here in the United States and counter polarization, dialogue across differences in the United States. Our annual Franciscan Justice Leadership Conference will take place October 12th through 15th, and that will focus on Franciscan peace building, including here at home in the United States. We will also be holding soon some environmental justice training workshops coming up in early April, and we will be holding the annual fan benefit. Once again, we will hold it at a soup kitchen, this time at St. Francis Inn in Philadelphia. You will receive an email with links with information about all these upcoming events. And I would like to invite my colleague, Director of Franciscan Justice Circles, Nora Pfeiffer, to deliver a closing prayer.
Let us pray. We submit ourselves and our prayer to our loving Creator. God most holy, you have given all creatures salvation and forgiveness. Look upon us now and come to our aid. In a world where so many suffer violence, may we be messengers of glad tidings to those in need, heralds of mercy and reconciliation, instruments of peace. Let us not harden our hearts as our ancestors did in the desert, but may we welcome your grace and truth with the courage of Abraham and Moses, Sarah and Miriam, and of countless other witnesses of faith, symbols of your eternal offer of shalom. May your word enter the marrow of our bones. May it illuminate the paths of mutual forgiveness. May it teach us to build communities of faith open to ever greater communication. May it teach us the way of salam. To you, Most High, all-powerful, good and gracious God. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Nora. Thank you again, Arab. Thank you, Robbie. And thank all of you participants for making time for this. Thank you for your commitment and your courageous action to transform ourselves to be peace builders now in this country and in the world. Thank you to all of you. Peace and all good from the Franciscan Action Network. Good night.
Good night. Thank you so much.